Hey guys, I'm Philip Wilder, and I'm here tied up because I want to further emphasize the point that I'm going to make in this Bible Byte. And what we're going to be talking about is one important key to stay free. Let's get to it. So I remember when I was in school, I would look out the windows and I'd see the birds and the squirrels flying and hopping around. And I was always so jealous. I felt tied down to the indoors because I had to do my schoolwork. I felt almost like a slave. I felt like I couldn't be free. And what I want to talk about today is one way that many of us don't feel free, or many of us don't even know yet, but they're walking into something, walking into bondage that's going to keep them from being free, which will keep them ultimately from following God and helping other people around them. So, the topic that I want to talk about is borrowing money or loans. And if you look at Psalm chapter 37, verse 21, it says, "The wicked borrows but does not pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives." So the first thing I want to clarify right here is that if you are borrowing money, that does not mean you're wicked. This is talking about the wicked who borrows and doesn't pay that money back, which legally you can't really do that much nowadays. But the first point that I want to make here is if you do borrow money, make sure you pay it back. And I'm talking specifically about between your friends or with other people that you just tell them like, hey, yeah, I'll pay you back for this. But you don't pay them back, or maybe you don't plan to pay them back, or maybe you forget to pay them back. If you're borrowing money from somebody else, it is your responsibility to remember to pay them back, because they're the ones who are doing the charitable act here, and it's very awkward to ask somebody and remind them, hey, remember that thing that you owe me? Fortunately, now we have apps like Venmo and PayPal that makes paying other people on the spot a lot easier. But we need to make sure that if we're borrowing money from a friend or someone who's being kind to us, pay them back. Don't let yourself forget. Put a note somewhere, put a reminder in your phone, whatever you need to do, make sure you pay them back. Because if you're not paying them back, then you're taking advantage of their kindness to loan you money, which is extra wrong. So do not do that. The second point that I want to make here is don't borrow money if you don't have to. Now, there are loans that are good and more so seen as investments, like maybe student loans or mortgages, whatever. But for the most part, there's a lot of loans that people have, and maybe you have loans like this that aren't very necessary. Maybe it's a car loan. And again, I could see some car loans as necessary. Maybe it's a loan for a vacation that you took, or a loan for something that you really just wanted to buy but didn't have the money for. The Bible talks against this and points out that it's not very smart to do that. Now, I'm going to try, but my hands are a little tied here, quite literally. Okay, Proverbs 22, verse 6, not 6. Verse 7 says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is a slave of the lender." Additionally, we can look at verses 26 through 27. It says, "Be not one of those who gives pledges, who puts up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken out from under you?" So it warns pretty heavily against people who borrow money. Again, sometimes borrowing money can be seen more so as an investment if you're putting it into a house or whatever it might be. But we should try our hardest not to borrow money, because this keeps us from following God and from giving generously to people around us who have these needs. Let's look at our national debt for an example. We have a huge national debt, and each year we need to pay almost $400 billion in interest alone. That's not even going towards paying off these debts. This is just interest. That's a lot of money. The exact number is $378 billion a year. Think about all the good that money could go towards. We could put it towards some initiatives to help poor people get out of poor housing, or we could put it towards helping other poor countries who are just struggling with a lot of difficulties, or we could even be putting it towards our future in advancements in technology, or in potentially even bringing up alternatives for energy sources that we have that are rapidly being depleted. Whatever it is, we could use that money for a lot of great things, but our nation right now is in bondage to this debt. We have to pay it every year, and in order to get out of it, we have to even pay even more. It's a very frustrating cycle to be stuck in, and that's why the Bible really encourages us not to fall into that frustrating cycle of having to pay and pay and pay and pay and not see yourself get any more out of debt. So let's make sure that we do not borrow money if we do not need to borrow money. But additionally, the third point that I want to make here is that, as it says here in verse 21, but the righteous is generous and gives. I experienced this freedom, and it was amazing. When you don't have any debt, you can be free to follow God. I one time got the opportunity to volunteer an entire summer for a Christian summer camp. And I didn't need much money in order to do that. All I needed to pay off was my phone bill and my car insurance, and then a few extra food things. But that was it. It was so nice to have very few expenses because they paid for my housing and they paid for most of my food at that time. So I could just volunteer my time with them and not really incur much of a loss. Whereas if I had a whole bunch of loans, interest would just start building up and I would have lots of stress and anxiety from it. Inevitably, loans create stress and anxiety, and God wants you to avoid that by not taking on loans that aren't smart loans, like maybe student loans or mortgages, whatever. He wants you to live at peace and to have a rich and rewarding lives of being able to follow God freely, but additionally being able to give generously. Think about it. If you pay $300 a month in interest alone on your loans, that money could easily be given towards somebody who has a need. You could be helping so many people with that money, but instead that money is going into moneylenders' pockets. It's going into the banks, which, let's be honest, do the banks really need any more money? No, they don't. But there's so many people who could use that money that we're just forking off to the banks every single month. So let's make sure that we're being smart with our money. The 3 things to remember is, 1, if you do borrow, make sure you pay those people back, especially if they're your friends and are lending to you out of a good conscience and just out of a desire to help you. Number 2, stay away from debt as much as possible. And if you go into debt, pay it off as quickly as possible so you can be free once more and not be stuck like me in this t-shirt, this sweater. Number 3, if you don't have debt, you can follow God faithfully wherever He calls you without a whole bunch of stress and anxiety. And additionally, you can give generously to help people around you. Well, I hope this encourages you to follow God faithfully, to give generously, but also to stay out of debt so you can be free to follow God as He calls. Thank you so much for watching, and live free.